Alright. Today we're going to be talking about fire investigation. I'm going to try to keep this short. What is fire investigation? What the fire investigators do is that they examine the scene of the fire to determine if the cause of the fire was accidental or on purpose. Burn patterns may help the investigators indicate the area of origin and the course of the fire, basically saying where the fire started, where it ended, what it hit, when did it hit it. Physical evidence can be collected and analyzed to help the investigators come to a conclusion. For example, the presence of ignitable liquid residues or tampered damaged utilities could indicate foul play, meaning that someone caused the fire to start. The history of fire. The modern fire investigation was born in the 2000s, but before that, they relied on observation and intuition rather than scientific methods. And they would basically if they would see little patterns, then they would assume then, oh, it had to been tampered with. Like with crazed glass, if they saw crazed glass from the increase in rapid temperature, which that's what happens, then they would assume that the case was intentional. And I'll talk about that later on when we talk about a certain case. Fire investigations lacked standardized guidelines, meaning they just winged it. They didn't really follow procedures. They didn't have any procedures. And the Great Fire of London is what really caused the startup of fire investigations, or somewhat at least, due to the fact that so many people were hurt and people didn't really know at the time what happened and why it happened, but it ended up being due to a bakery. After the 2000s, more scientific approaches to fire investigations were made. In 1985, I know it's not the 2000s, but it's very close. A technical a technical committee was appointed to develop a guide for fire and explosion investigations, which helped roll off the start off the whole modern investigations. Uh, they finally collect evidence and analyze findings from and form hypotheses and conclusions depending on how the fire was started and such like that. Modern fire investigation damn damn utilizes advanced tools and techniques, including infrared cameras and chromatographs. Big word. The procedures of fire investigation is what they do is identify, collect, and preserve evidence, which basically every forensics section really does. They prevent evidence contamination. They package the evidence and they transport it in a truck or vehicle, and they establish and maintain the chain of custody. And in a case of arson, there can be weapons, explosive devices, matches, and anything that could give them the insight regarding the origins of the fire. The scientific that they use is that they recognize the need, identify the problem, see if there's anyone injured. They define the problem, they collect the data, they analyze the data, develop a hypothesis. It could be wrong or right, and then they test the hypothesis, and of course there's going to be error of margin of error, and so they test it and try to find a reasoning it and find the best hypothesis that yeah. The challenges is, well, when fire investigators step into the courtroom, they carry not just evidence but the weight of credibility of said evidence and hypothesis. The testability is the theory or technique scientifically testable. Peer review, has it been subjected to peer review and publication? And the error rate, what I was talking about, the margin of error. What is the potential error rate and is it acceptable? Standards, are there established standards governing its application? And the general acceptance, is the method broadly accepted within the scientific community? Destruction of evidence by fire itself, that would be very bad because that would leave out, like, there would be no evidence because of it, or the evidence could just not be usable. The need to differentiate accidental from intentional causes, that could be very difficult, and there could be like many cases where like you could get it wrong. The complexities of fire behavior and environmental factors, and of course the fumes and hazardous air of the site. Oh, that is not supposed to be there. Um, Career pathways. There are many career pathways in the fire investigation. Fire investigators can start their careers off in the fire service, law enforcement, academia, insurance, research, engineering, law, or private practice. The path to fire investigator varies on where you start. And the benefits uh, are like you feel like you're benefiting the society, like you're supporting people, like you feel like you're giving the people that might have died justice. The constant demand of fire investigators because of how often and frequent fires are. It can be challenging. So like, if you don't like things being easy and the same thing over and over again, then that's a benefit. The flexible work options. The pay though. Entry level fire investigators, they get about 45,000 to 60,000 per year. The mid levels fire investigators get 60,000 to 80,000 per year. Senior fire investigators get 80,000 to 100,000 per year, and it just goes on. Because I'm pretty sure you can get even higher. But I felt like that was just, I didn't want to read all that off because that would just take too long. It would just be reading text. This is the case I was talking about. Cameron Todd Williams case. The fire and initial investigation. The date of the fire was December 23, 1991, and it was in Texas, Carcinat. I can't say that. Basically, a fire broke out in the home in his home, and well, 3 of his children died. But he escaped the fire, but he was unable to rescue his children, which they died to the fire. Initially people thought like suspicious of him because like he was the only one that lived, and he's already had like an iffy past, like he has criminal activity already, and he was apparently pretty optimistic and calm even though he just lost his whole family. So they were already suspicious on him. The findings were concluded that it was initially set based on the several observations of the scene. There was burn patterns. They observed burn patterns that interpreted as pour patterns on the floor, like as if like they were pouring gasoline on the floor and they left a trail. Because like usually people like pour gasoline in like a straight line maybe, or like there's a trail, as I said. Crazed glass, which I was talking about before, small cracks in the window, which is thought to indicate rapid temperature rising, and it was consistent with arson, and that's what I meant by. That's what was wrong back then because they saw patterns that are consistent with each other, and they assumed it was arson, which it is not. V patterns, the V-shaped burn patterns on the wall were also cited as evidence that the fire had multiple points of origin, suggesting intentional ignition. They had a trial. He was arrested and charged with capital murder at his trial in 1992. The argument was that he deliberately set the fire and killed his children, possibly due to marital problems or his dissatisfaction with his life, which I find that weird because if he was dissatisfied, wouldn't he have joined in the fire as well? And his testimony, in addition to the forensics fire evidence, a jailhouse informant, Johnny Webb, testified that William had confessed to setting the fire while in custody. This testimony was later discredited and played a crucial role in his conviction, because later on we learned that he lied. The jury found William guilty of murder by arson, and he was sentenced to death. And then, of course, he was executed. Then they decided to re-examine the case after he died. And it revealed that the techniques that were used in this trial were flawed and outdated. As I said before, they were mainly using patterns. It was concluded by Dr. Harold Hertz that the fire was likely accidental, with many findings such as burn patterns and glass grazing being misinterpreted. Additionally, the jailhouse informant who testified that William confessed later recanted his testimony. These revelations raised serious doubts about William's guilt and the integrity of the original investigation. Which I'm like, damn, you lost your kids in that fire, and you try to keep a smile up, like you try to be calm and all that, and then they assume you did it. So you have no kids anymore. You have no family. You're in jail and you're being accused of being a child murderer. And of course, you lose your home as well. That's just like, damn. And then you get executed like that. And of course, people lying on your name, which even was crucial to the case, the lie. And it's just like, damn. Like, that was so unfair for my boy. Anyways, here are the sources I used. I tried to refrain from using Wikipedia a lot, but I ended up having to do that when I was looking up the history of fire investigation, because I found that quite difficult to do. Hope you enjoyed my little speech, my presentation.